The Galactic Institute for Interstellar Harmony, or GIH, was the jewel of peaceful cooperation, a floating university city nestled in the orbit of Luthor Prime, a neutral world with a breathable atmosphere and near-zero natural predators. Here, species from across the spiral arms sent their brightest minds to study diplomacy, ecology, and mutual understanding. It was the last place anyone expected to see a Deathworlder. Professor Jezek, a wispy, four-eyed Thrinaxi with translucent skin and a voice like paper rustling, stood at the front of the wide, tiered lecture hall. Behind him, the holographic projection of a three-dimensional rainforest rotated lazily. Lush green canopies, fluttering symbiotic avians, and docile herbivores gently shimmered in midair. "And this class," he said, in a tone that conveyed infinite patience, "is the Bondari Forest of Halex 4. Note the absence of apex predators. A perfect example of a cooperative biome. Now, our final presentation comes from, our newest student, Cadet Rena Solis from Earth, a Class 12 Deathworld." The room shifted. Jaws flexed, fur bristled, wings rustled. A dozen species sat in that room, aquatic, silicon-based, feathered, gelatinous. None of them had ever met a human. Most hadn't even heard one speak in person. Earth had only recently been invited into the galactic community, and Rena Solis was the first ambassador of her kind in a civilian context. She stood slowly from her seat near the back. She wasn't tall by galactic standards, only about 1.6 meters, but there was something dense about her, a compact energy. She walked to the podium with unhurried confidence and adjusted the hologram controls. "What I'm going to show you today," she said, her voice even and neutral, "is a creature called a shark. Specifically, Carcharodon carcharias, the great white." The hologram shifted with a low-pitched hum. Gone were the gentle trees and herbivores. In their place, cold, churning ocean. And from below, a sleek, torpedo-shaped figure gliding through the deep. Gray, silent, ancient. "This predator," Rena began, "is over 400 million years old in evolutionary terms. It hasn't needed to change much. Nature got it right the first time." The class watched silent. One of the Drell students, an aquatic being named Zorix with glassy eyes and gill fronds, tilted his head curiously. "It detects blood in parts per billion. Tracks electric impulses. It can breach the surface and attack prey from beneath. Its jaws contain multiple rows of teeth that regenerate constantly. And when it bites, it twists its entire body to rip through bone and muscle." A quiet squelch echoed as the hologram showed a simulation of the shark breaching, grabbing a seal, and descending in a red bloom. Professor Jezek made a clicking sound that meant discomfort. Miss Solis, perhaps something more cooperative from your world?" Rena raised an eyebrow, but her tone remained neutral. "You asked for a predator native to my region. This is common in coastal zones. Humans regularly swim in the same waters." Another student, a photosynthetic creature with tendrils for limbs, raised a vine. "But how do you survive such an apex life form? Your species is soft-bodied, yes? No scales or carapace." Rena gave a half-smile. "That's true. But we're clever. We make boats, use sonar, carry weapons. Sometimes we just know how to read the water." "Wait," Zorix said, leaning forward, his voice rippling in low tones. "You coexist with these things?" "Not just sharks," Rena said, tapping the control. "Bears, crocodiles, big cats, venomous snakes. We've learned to manage." C.H. Kale, a tall, silk-skinned Valari student from a peacekeeping species, hissed through his mandibles. "That's monstrous. Why would your people stay on such a world?" Rena shrugged. "Didn't have much choice. It was home." A pause fell over the lecture hall. "But surely your civilization has risen beyond this?" Professor Jezek ventured. Rena's smile deepened, eyes sharp now. "We've built cities, tamed disease, even touched our moon. But nature's always there, reminding us where we came from. We didn't conquer the world. We survived it." Zorix looked back at the hologram. The shark continued to swim in a lazy circle. What does it feel like to live with predators like that? Rena's gaze turned thoughtful. It makes you careful, aware, creative. It makes you respect the edge between life and death. Some call it paranoia. We call it preparedness. The silence returned, deeper this time. Not uneasy, more like the stillness of a predator being noticed for the first time. Professor Jacek fluttered his notes. That will conclude the presentations for today. Cadet Solis, thank you for that educational experience. As the students filed out, murmurs rippled among them. Zorix lingered. Rena, he said, may I ask something personal? Sure, she said, slinging her data pad under her arm. Were you afraid, growing up among such threats? She smiled, genuinely this time. Of course. But fear's like fire. Dangerous, yeah, but if you learn to use it, it keeps you alive. He bobbed his head slowly, processing that. Behind them, Sage Kale spoke again, his voice sharper. You sound proud of this brutality, as if violence is something to cherish. Rena turned, meeting his eyes without flinching. I'm not proud of the danger, but I am proud that we made it through. Every species here evolved to avoid risk. We evolved through it. That changes how you think. Some would say that makes you a threat, Sage Kale muttered. Some would say it makes us useful, Rena replied. Then she gave a parting nod and walked out of the hall. Later, in the dormitory common area, Zorix floated in a low-gravity tank while messaging his home pod. One phrase kept repeating in his mind, echoing like sonar. We didn't conquer the world. We survived it. His species had never even feared extinction. Not once. But now he found himself imagining a life shaped by it, and wondering what such beings might be capable of. The dormitory complex on the west wing of the Galactic Institute for Interstellar Harmony was known for its peaceful ambience, serene glowing pools, climate-regulated gardens, and humming walls that emitted calming frequencies for sleep-compatible environments. At least, until Earth's first student showed up. Rena Solis sat cross-legged on a synthetic mat in the open common room, a half-circle of curious alien students forming around her like a low-budget campfire gathering. The glow from the ambient lighting shimmered across scale, fur, and chitin. In the center, her data pad floated upright, slowly rotating a 3D image of a bear mid-roar. What does it do? Asked Crixie, a crystalline being shaped like a spinning snowflake. It mauls things, Rena said. It can run at 40 kilometers per hour, climbs trees, swims, and will eat just about anything. 40. Zorix's gill fronds flared. That's faster than most herbivores. Yep. They don't chase for long. Just long enough. Rena tapped the pad. A simulation played, a grizzly slamming into a tent in a human campsite. One swipe, and the tent collapsed. Humans learned to carry noisemakers and bear spray. Or we hang our food in trees. Crixie's facets dimmed slightly. You camped among these? Sure. Family trips. They rarely attack. You just need to know how not to provoke them. The group shifted. This was not the kind of Earth lore they'd expected, and definitely not what they'd learned in planetary dossiers. You have technology, said Yentl, a six-limbed arboreal species with flower petal eyes. Why not stay in fortified settlements? We do, but we also explore. Rena shrugged. Our history's full of people who went places they shouldn't and came back with maps. Or didn't come back at all, but paved the way for someone else. Zorix looked troubled. How did your species survive? Statistically, you should have gone extinct multiple times. Rena smirked. We probably did. A few times. But we don't go down easy. That got a quiet chuckle from someone in the back. But not everyone was amused. C.H. Kale, tall and severe as always, had been watching silently. Now he moved forward, his carapace catching the light in sharp relief. Is this the kind of pride your species values? Predators, storms, death. Rena paused. It's not pride in the danger. It's pride in how we outlived it. C.H. Kale folded his arms. And do you tell these stories to inspire courage? Or to subtly threaten us? The room tensed. Even the lights dimmed slightly. Zorix interjected, trying to smooth the tension. No one feels threatened, CH Kale. It's just cultural exchange. Stories of power, CH Kale said. Be careful what kind you spread. Rena stood, not angrily but steadily. Where I come from, stories about danger help us prepare. We're not taught to avoid scary things. We're taught how to face them. A quiet beat passed. Then she added, but if that's too upsetting, I can stop. Zorix swam a tight circle in his tank.
No.
Please tell us about something else. Rena thought for a moment, then tapped her pad again. Okay, she said. Let me tell you about lightning. 30 minutes later, they were still listening. So we started putting rods on our buildings, she said, gesturing with her hands. We built systems to ground the energy into the earth. And you harnessed this force? Crixie asked, glinting with awe.
Eventually, yeah.
Lightning's just electricity. Dangerous, but useful. A soft chime sounded from her datapad. An alert. Notice. Training simulation 14 beta. 20 minutes. Oh, right, Rena said, stretching. Gotta go do a survival sim. Zorix blinked. That's optional for most students. I signed up for all of them, she said with a grin. Habit. Zorix hesitated, then offered. I'll come. Rena tilted her head. You sure? You've made me curious. The training simulation room was a marvel of bioreactive technology. Its floor plates adjusted for terrain, its climate adapters replicated weather conditions down to the humidity, and its AI ran dynamic threat scenarios for learning conflict avoidance and nonviolent strategy. Rena, Zorix, and 4 other students stood before the entrance portal as the system initialized. Scenario: Jungle biome. Objective: Navigate to evacuation point. Threat level: Mild. The group relaxed. Mild usually meant a malfunctioning drone or a roving herbivore. The doors hissed open. It wasn't mild. Somewhere along the programming cycle, the sim had been corrupted. Instead of a misty jungle with occasional barriers, the simulation loaded in a full-class 7 predator. 6-legged, camouflaged, venomous, and territorial. The moment the group entered, it attacked. Zorix screamed as it lunged from the foliage. One student was knocked aside. The rest scattered. Rena moved like lightning. She grabbed a long branch from the simulated floor, snapped it into a spear point, and drove it toward the creature's flank. It hissed and backed off momentarily. Move, she shouted, pulling Zorix behind a tree. It's tracking heat and sound. You okay? Zorix's fins quivered. That thing isn't part of the normal cycle. Yeah, no kidding. She peered out. We need to draw it off and reach the evac beacon. How do you plan to do that? We bait it. I'll run left, make noise, get it to chase me. You go right, circle around to the beacon tower. You'll be safe once the AI sees you reach it. Zorix stared at her. That's suicide. Only if I'm slow, she said with a wink. Then she ran. Later, after the simulation ended, forcefully shut down by emergency override, the students were pulled from the sim pod. Medical drones swarmed over them. One student had minor burns, another had passed out from fear. Rena had a deep scratch down her left arm and was grinning like a maniac. I am filing a complaint, someone muttered. I'm still unsure how you did that, Zorix said quietly, floating beside Rena. You moved like you'd trained for it. I have, Rena said, glancing at her still bleeding arm. It's standard in Earth's military prep. We do basic survival courses as teenagers. You know, just in case. In case of what? Everything. Zorix was quiet for a while. You weren't even scared, were you? Oh, I was terrified, she said. But fear's just fuel, if you know what to do with it. Across the room, C.H. Kale stood near the observation window, staring at the jungle simulation flickering offline. He didn't speak to her, but he watched. That night, Zorix returned to the dorm early. He floated in his tank, looking at the night cycle lights as they dimmed. Rena's stories played over and over in his mind. She didn't brag. She didn't threaten. She just lived in a world that demanded readiness, demanded creativity, demanded fire in the soul. And somehow, despite all of it, She still smiled. Maybe, he thought, that's what made humans truly terrifying.
Not the teeth.
Not the weapons, but the fact they survived, again and again, and still had the heart to tell bedtime stories about it. The Galactic Institute for Interstellar Harmony prided itself on its neutrality. It was not just a school, it was a stage. A proving ground for future ambassadors, scientists, peacekeepers, and philosophers. The idea of violence, even simulated, was abhorrent to most who passed through its halls. Which was why, when an error in the survival simulation nearly resulted in severe injury to multiple students, the upper echelons of the institute took notice. By morning, Rena Solis had received a summons. Not a student-level demerit. Not a disciplinary meeting. A summons to the Council of Intercultural Integrity. Only serious representatives or accused diplomatic violators were ever called before them. This was politics now. The council chamber hovered in 0G above the atrium gardens. It was constructed of pale blue crystal that resonated with soft tones when beings entered, a calming measure for nervous hearts. But Rena wasn't nervous. She was pissed. Standing alone at the center dais, surrounded by 12 alien council members arranged in a slow, floating circle, she waited with arms folded. Her wounded arm was wrapped neatly, her face calm, but beneath that calm was a heat that had been simmering since yesterday's shutdown. Counselor Mirren spoke first, a spherical being whose voice emerged from color fluctuations on its surface. Cadet Solis. Thank you for arriving promptly. This matter is delicate. Understood, Counselor. Let us begin by stating that you are not under criminal investigation. However, your behavior has prompted concern. Rena blinked. My behavior? I didn't program the killer jungle beast. Counselor Voth, a broad, multi-limbed Gurati whose people valued stoicism, rumbled. You are the only student to physically confront the creature. With a weapon. Improvised, Rena clarified. A stick. That is not the point, Voth said. You initiated direct combat. To save someone's life, she said flatly. Should I have let it rip his lungs out so the simulation could get a good grade? Some murmured. Counselor Teklar, a floating bioluminescent jelly-like being, pulsed softly. Your responses were not standard. Not by galactic protocol. Rena felt the quiet tension rise, not just from the council, but from the dozens of observers behind the translucent gallery wall. Students. Faculty. A few media drifters. They were all watching the Deathworlder. She sighed. With respect, counselors, I don't come from a world where standard saves you. Counselor Voth leaned forward. Explain. Rena met his eyes. We don't wait for consensus when a predator's charging. We don't form committees to decide if the venom's real. We move. We act. If someone's dying, we do something. Because on Earth, the ones who pause die. Silence. Then, how do you expect to thrive in a galaxy based on cooperation when your instincts lean toward confrontation? Rena gave a small, tired smile. You're confusing action with aggression. Voth tilted his head. Explain again. I didn't attack that thing to prove dominance. I did it because it was the best path to survival for everyone. My instincts aren't violent. They're practical. You just think they're violent because you haven't needed them in 10,000 years. She let that hang. Humans didn't evolve in peace, she continued. We evolved in chaos. Predators. Plagues. Ice ages. Volcanoes. We survived by moving faster, thinking smarter, and risking everything. Not because we wanted to, because we had to. Teklar's glow dimmed. You frighten many of your peers. Rena nodded. Yeah, I've noticed. Counselor Mirren shifted hue. We'd like to propose a compromise. You will refrain from further simulation training. Limit your cultural exchanges to non-violent topics. And agree to regular psychological evaluations. Rena let out a breath through her nose. You're trying to declaw me, Voth growled. This is a center of learning, cadet. Not a battlefield. Rena's eyes hardened. Then maybe, she said quietly, you should start learning what real survival looks like. Because not every planet is Luthor Prime. And not every species gets to grow up in the safety you've known. She stepped back. But sure, she added bitterly, I'll stop scaring your kids with stories of the real world. Zorix waited for her outside the chamber. His gills twitched nervously when he saw her expression. Did they punish you?
No.
They cautioned me. She rolled her eyes. They want me to stop being so human. I don't think that's possible. She chuckled. Me neither. They walked in silence for a moment before Zorix spoke again. I watched some of your people's old footage. From your history archives. Rena glanced sideways. Yeah. I saw one where your kind ran into a burning building to save someone they didn't even know. Another where you carried wounded soldiers through gunfire. And one where you strapped yourselves to rockets just to reach space. She didn't reply immediately. I think I get it now, he said softly. You're not dangerous because you like violence. You're dangerous because you're willing to face it. Rena's jaw tightened. She gave him a quick nod. Thanks. That night, the news of the council hearing spread across the institute. Reactions varied. Some whispered that Rena was unstable. Others called her a hero. A few began re-examining Earth's Deathworld classification and what it really meant. C.H. Kale, for once, said nothing. But he did begin reading up on human conflict theory. A week later, the unexpected happened. A diplomatic convoy en route to the Institute was ambushed by pirate raiders. The escort drones were hacked. The signal was jammed. Emergency distress went out, and the closest aid vessel was nearly an hour away. The pirates, as it turned out, didn't care for galactic harmony. They boarded. And inside the passenger hold was a class of students, GIH interns on a political outreach rotation. Zorix was one of them. Inside the transport, chaos reigned. The pirates, spindly creatures with buzzsaw limbs and corrosive blood, barked in metallic voices and rounded up hostages. Zorix trembled beside his classmates. His heart pounded in his gills. Then he heard a voice crackle through the static of the comms. This is Cadet Solis. I'm on the second shuttle. Approaching breach point. Zorix's heart stopped. Rena, he whispered. Moments later, a loud clang echoed through the outer hull. Then a pop, and the airlocks hissed as a figure emerged, EVA suit sealed, a harpoon-style breaching tool in one hand. The pirates turned, and Rena Solis, human, Deathworlder survivalist, charged. The breach sounded like thunder. Metal groaned and folded as the secondary airlock ruptured inward. A cloud of pressurized mist and magnetic vapor whooshed into the corridor, and through it, the silhouette of Rena Solis emerged. She looked like something out of a war-era propaganda reel. Her EVA suit was scorched from a hard re-entry drop, a pulse hammer holstered at her hip, and in her gloved fists was a breaching spear, more utility than weapon, but sharpened with intent. The pirate crew paused. 8 of them. Mandible-faced, scythe-armed, exo-banded. Veteran raiders from the Keshel Fracture. They had conquered outposts and scavenged derelict fleets. But they'd never fought a human before. Rena took one step forward. And then another. One of the pirates screeched and charged. Rena didn't dodge. She braced. Let him come. As the creature lunged, she sidestepped at the last second, jamming the spear upward, catching it between the torso plates. She shoved, twisted, and used its own momentum to throw it into the bulkhead. The pirate slumped, unconscious. The rest advanced with caution. In the cargo bay, Zorix and the other student diplomats huddled together. The pirates had sealed them in with an armed drone watching overhead. Then came the distant clangs. Gunfire. Screeches. A voice on the comms. Zorix. If you can hear me, override the drone's visual sensors. They're spectrum limited. Use light refraction pulse. Your kind uses echo-based pulse refraction, right? Zorix blinked. How does she? She studied us, muttered another in turn. Quickly, Zorix accessed a nearby terminal. He reconfigured a sensor ping, modulated to confuse optical relays, and triggered the pulse. The drone blinked, wobbled, then dropped like a stone. Gasps echoed through the bay. Zorix stood. We're helping her, he said. Let's move. In the main hallway, Rena's spear had snapped.
She was down to fists.
One of the pirates had grabbed her arm. Another slammed into her ribs with a baton. Her suit's warning systems shrieked in her ear. Bones creaked. Vision blurred. But she kept fighting, because this is what humans did. They fought when they couldn't win. They fought when they were alone. They fought when they were bleeding, broken, burning, and sometimes because they were. A pirate raised a serrated blade. Too slow. Rena yanked a broken power line from the wall. Sparks flew, and she drove it into the pirate's chest. He dropped. Only 2 left. And that's when Zorix and the students arrived. They had scavenged tools, thrown together shielding, improvised traps. They were scared. They were green. But they were inspired. The first pirate turned to face them and caught a repurposed electromagnetic stunner to the face. Zorix fired it again, and again, until the device shorted out in his hand. The last pirate looked around. Rena, bloodied but standing. Zorix, trembling but determined. A dozen interstellar students with homemade gear, rising up like citizens in an uprising. The pirate dropped its blade.
And ran.
Hours later, the emergency response ships arrived. Medical bots swarmed the wounded. The pirates were taken into custody. The council's delegates were recovered unharmed. And Rena was laid out on a stretcher with 2 cracked ribs, internal bruising, and a minor concussion. "You are," the medtech said, glancing at the scanner. "Officially insane." "Just Earth normal," Rena muttered, then passed out. The aftermath shook the Institute. For centuries, the Galactic Institute for Interstellar Harmony had operated under the assumption that advanced civility rendered brute survival obsolete. That diplomacy, technology, and cultural understanding would always shield them from danger. But danger had come anyway, and a human had stopped it. 3 days later, Rena stood once again in the council's chamber, this time in formal dress. Her injuries were half-healed, her presence steadier than ever. Counselor Mirren's voice carried solemn weight. "You broke protocol, Cadet Solis." Rena nodded. "I did." "You engaged in violence." "I did." "You risked your life for non-human classmates and diplomatic targets." "I did." Mirren's surface pulsed green-blue. "And for that, we owe you a debt." A hush fell over the chamber. Counselor Voth stepped forward, arms crossed. "You've challenged many of our assumptions, Cadet. About your kind. About strength. About fear." He looked down at her, expression unreadable. "Tell us. What drives your people to such lengths?" Rena paused. Then she answered, not with bravado, but with quiet truth. "We're not fearless. We're afraid all the time. Of storms, sickness, pain, death. But we learn how to move through fear. Because we've had no choice. For us, survival isn't guaranteed. It never was. So we built stories.
Songs. Fire.
Families. Everything we love because it might be taken away." She looked up, eyes fierce. "And when someone threatens that, we fight. Not because we're monsters, but because we care." Mirren rippled gold, reverence. Counselor Teklar floated forward. "We would ask that you speak before the incoming first-year students. Help them understand what it means to protect and to endure." Rena smiled. "I'd be honored." Weeks passed, and the legend of the Deathworlder in class spread far beyond the Institute. Diplomats quoted her. Military analysts studied her reflexes. Scientists published new papers on Earth's survival adaptations. And across the stars, young aliens began watching videos of Earth creatures, bears, sharks, lightning, volcanoes, and seeing not just threats, but testaments to the creatures who outlived them. One evening, back in the dormitory, Rena sat beside Zorix under the planetarium dome. They watched the artificial night sky together, simulated stars wheeling slowly above. "So," he said, "I finally looked up what a shark really is." Rena grinned. "And I thought you were exaggerating." "Never do. I mean, rows of regenerating teeth? Electroreception? Sleeping with half their brain on at all times? Yep. They're terrifying. They're just the ocean's version of what we are on land, Rena said. Relentless. Efficient. Not because we want to be. Because we have to be. Zorix turned toward her, voice quiet. I think I understand Earth better now. She looked over. Really? You weren't trying to scare us. You were trying to prepare us. She gave him a sideways smirk. Exactly. They sat in silence for a while. Then Zorix spoke again. Do you think others like you will come to the Institute? Oh, Rena said, her eyes gleaming. They will. Some will be softer. Some tougher. But they'll all carry that same fire. Then the galaxy will never be the same.
Good, she said.
It shouldn't be. Final scene. Galactic Symposium. 1 year later. A massive auditorium filled with thousands of interstellar delegates. The stage lights flickered on. Rena Solis stepped forward, now in formal envoy uniform. Behind her, a banner displayed the Institute's new motto in a dozen languages, and beneath it, a simple Earth phrase. Soft?
No.
We were forged in fire. She took the podium, smiled, and began with, let me tell you about a creature from Earth. It's called a shark.